Welcome to Prime Suspects. Alongside Adam Bjorn and Prime Sports co-founder Joe Brennan Jr., I'm your host, Matt Landis. We'll get to the NBA and NHL champions shortly, not to mention the World Cup. But first, Adam, let's lead off by having you give us a peek behind the curtain at the latest happenings for Prime Sports across New Jersey and Ohio.
We now own Prime Sports. Planetech is the ruler of the kingdom right now. So
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. The king is dead. Long live the king.
Long process. Big thanks to New Jersey regulators getting it over the line in the end. I won't talk about other regulators that didn't manage to. There was a big effort on it. Took a lot of effort. But now we are partners and Market Skin partners with Caesars. So for all your cage deposits, head down to Harrah's in New Jersey. Never been there. Don't know exactly where it is, but I'm sure it's a great little casino. And with Ohio, there is no wagering taking place right now. Didn't get the licensing through. For me, New Jersey's always been the crown jewel. So, you had to sort of pick one battle and lose another. It looks like a 6 to 8 week process. We're on the docket, I believe, for the July meeting, which is either the 15th or 20th. As we will miss the entire World Cup, I don't think there's any rush on us turning those betting aspects back on once we get to the other side. And it's just preparation for football season and whatnot on that side of things. So Kentucky, unscathed, went along as is, and obviously Arizona we have down there as well. But it was a long, arduous journey. I learned more about bankruptcy stuff than I ever wanted to learn in my life. But at the end of the day, we're now sort of the controllers of our own destiny. We are now the B2B and serving our B2C, and yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Well, congratulations to you and the Planetech team. And with that, we'll go ahead and pivot from a new business structure to newly minted champions, starting with the Knicks being back on top of the basketball world. Adam, how was that result for the book? And from rest versus rust to experience versus inexperience, what did the market miss by favoring the Spurs the way it did throughout the series?
Well, I think just the mindset was the West over the East. I mean, I was planted in there from the outset. And it was a conversation a couple of days before that, it was kind of laid out. Well, they match up. They just match up so well against the Spurs. And I think it showed that one game where they were down by 29, came back there. And even in the final game, what ended up 5-6-5. Anyway, it just felt like even when they were down, it just felt like they were going to make a game of it at the end and they come out on top. But it did look like there was a bit of inexperience in the Spurs side of it, but what a beast of a team they obviously have for the future going forward. And yeah, for the bookies, I think it was a good result for all of the bookies outside of New Jersey, New York, because I heard there was some horrible future positions for New Jersey, New York books. But yeah, for us, it was good result. Knicks won. Yeah, move on to next season.
And Joe, building on that, what were your top takeaways from the NBA Finals?
I'm a genius. If we roll back the tape, I picked the Knicks before the season even began. So if I'm being honest, I just pulled that one right out of my ass. No, I mean, it's interesting. You can say it's one of those things like when we talk about how the Spurs being so favored and everything like that, people can talk about well, the process is right. The result was wrong. This is when, the data doesn't bear out something like the inexperience that Adam talked about. I mean, just looking at that 29-point comeback in Game 4, which Adam and I had the pleasure of watching at the Elbow Room right there on the waterfront in Fort Lauderdale. What you really saw is just the Spurs are they arrived in the finals a year ahead of time. They're an incredibly inexperienced team. When you see young guys who are pulling up behind the three-point arc to try and take a 20% chance of scoring 3 when they had about a 95% chance of scoring 2 by taking it through a clear lane to the hoop, and did it time and time again. The decision-making was poor on their part. It was because they were young and they were frantic. Whereas, the Knicks, everybody wants to talk about the East. East is inferior to the West. I mean, the East is physical. That final was physical. There's a lot of banging around. And being an old salt, that's really tough. Plus, it's not like the Knicks didn't have any championship pedigree on the team. 3 guys from Villanova's national championship team. I know, people might laugh about that, but that's a tough, really cohesive team that Nova had there for a little while. And you really see that those players really came through in the playoffs. But all in all, it's a shame that one didn't go 7, because it was such a lively and entertaining finals. But, like Spurs all season, learn how to take a lead and hold on to it, because they just got eaten alive by the old guys in the fourth quarter.
And Joe, the Knicks aren't the only new champions you called correctly, so let's stick with you, further entrenched as the mayor of Toutville, having also nailed your Hurricanes prediction. What are your top takeaways from Carolina, also winning the Stanley Cup this past weekend?
That one was less pulling it out of my ass. Carolina had every tool in the bag, plus they had the coach, Rod the Bod Brindamore, who has the sad distinction of being one of my all-time favorite Flyers, although he found his success, obviously, with Carolina after they traded him away for Keith Primo and a bucket of tape. I mean, that was a great series. Most of the games were just razor-thin margins on those. It's amazing for me. You see Vegas in the finals, and they're wearing the Circa logo on their jerseys when they're playing at home. That's just, look at how far our industry has come in such a short amount of time. You talk about not only the Golden Knights being like, new franchise and how successful they've been, 1 cup, 3 trips to the finals. But when you look at our industry and how quickly it's become part of the fabric of sports, congratulations to Derek and the guys at Circa for being right there on the logos, having the profile in the final. But congratulations to Carolina. It was in the bag the whole time.
And Adam, in recent weeks, I've gotten the impression from you that hockey handle has been a bit more of an afterthought. So let's frame it up this way. How did the Stanley Cup final handle and result compare to UFC Freedom 250?
There was still hockey going on last week. I didn't even get the memo. It was very minimal, especially once the World Cup started. It was very much an afterthought. It ended up, Sunday was, what a day of sports. I got up getting ready for the golf, closing out the RBC Canadian, then World Cup games, then remembered that UFC 250 was on, and then you had a Stanley Cup game as well. So at the end of the day, it was a distance fourth of those 4 sports, but, congrats to the Canadians and Joe's pick there. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff on these days, and unfortunately the hockey was not hitting my radar very much last week.
All right. Well, part of that may be because you were in Fort Lauderdale for a hot minute. So let's wrap up this first segment with a jump ball to the two of you for a review on SBC Summit Americas in Fort Lauderdale.
I think the silence sums it up. It was probably the most sad and disappointing conference I have seen in all my life. I don't know if it was because of the World Cup. I don't know if it was just, the movement of those two LATAM and US Worlds together last year. I don't know if it was because of the heat of the Miami summer and all those kind of things, but it was sad. I only did the 1 day on the floor. I don't know if it picked up on the second day. Again, got to hit up a bunch of people that I rarely get to see outside of those conferences. So it did its purpose, hit up the elbow room, saw a great NBA game. But yeah, I thought it was very bland.
Well, I'm going to say, sadly, I've been at worse conferences over the last 20 plus years in this industry. It was quiet. I think the timing of it, obviously, I wasn't worried about it being difficult to get to the airport after my panel on Thursday, because I figured the streets would be clear from everybody starting their World Cup parties. And I was right. Practically sailed over to the airport after that. But it was very quiet. I think another reason why it's quiet, and maybe it's because of not only my panel, but all the other panels. Like, you saw the different panel titles were supposed to be talking about this, that mine was supposed to be about, is regulation standing in the way of innovation? And it just turned into a prediction markets discussion. And the prediction market guys weren't there. At least they weren't there publicly. Who knows who was there in disguise? But it's tough to have that kind of cognitive dissonance in your program. And, every discussion has to skew back towards prediction markets. As a result, I think it kind of tainted the entire program. If I had one critique for the SBC guys, well, actually 2. 1, SBC guys should do whatever they can to convince the TX Odd guys to reopen Trev's Bar on the floor at their conference, because that was the highlight last year. The TX guys did not have that this year. And so there was no real magnet in the middle of the floor. That was a nice organic kind of Star Wars cantina place where the entire industry, rich and poor, young and old, all gravitated towards. But beyond that, it's like, look, like if we're going to have a program and we say we're going to talk about this, let's talk about this. Let's not have every discussion drift its way back to prediction markets versus sportsbook.
And with that, we'll go ahead and shift gears from the end of the NBA and NHL seasons and another SBC summit to the beginning of the World Cup. Guys, we've alluded to it enough. Let's really dive into the main event now. Adam, starting with you, from a dominant debut for Team USA to surprising draws for Brazil and Spain, what are the top results you've seen so far across Prime Sports and BetCris? And what are you following most closely right now?
I mean, the draw results that are normally the bread and butter for us have not landed this season. It seems like the word was out before the event. Early on, the draws are the place to be. Yesterday, there was just money all over the draws all day long from both professionals and recreationals. Personally, I started the day great, tipping out 0-0 Spain on my live stream. So I don't need to pick another winner for the entire tournament. I'm on good graces there. And then, just the way it's been great games. I mean, back and forth. The underdogs have definitely been hitting above their weight, or maybe they're just better than what everyone's giving them credit for. The group stage is kind of watered down because 32 of the 48 will get through to the next round. So there's really, you just don't want to finish last in your group, and there's opportunities to finish third. So there's very cagey sort of games being played of 1 point was kind of perfect with the way these teams matched up in the first round. But yeah, I think it's building up for what's going to be a good second round of the group stages. We've got obviously some big teams, France and that rolling out, Argentina today as well. But, our volume's been really good. I've heard from the other side of the world in Europe that the volume's been really poor because of the time zones, and people are just struggling to get, engaged at this time of the tournament. I expect that to pick up as we go on. But as expected, this is a perfect time zone for us. The players are coming in. We're getting the action that we expected, both in the US with Prime and BetCris, and then Latin America, obviously we have BetCris there as well. So it's been everything that we'd hoped it'd be. Again, some great footballing contests. Australia won a soccer game, which I never bet them when it comes to soccer. Was on them against Turkey. They showed up strongly. USA knocked it out of the park with their 4-1 win over Paraguay. And I think there's a little bit of momentum there now of, oh shit, we actually have a team that can win games. So, and that group's set up for them as well. So I think it's only going to get bigger and better from here. The aspects that we sort of looked at it and the things of the heat, is definitely showing up in some of these games. And I think that'll take its toll as we move forward as well. So yeah, for me, it's been a great event so far, good results, and just another 4 games today.
To follow up on one thing I heard from you there, load management might be extreme given the gravity of every single World Cup match. But how much do you think the new format this time around has to do with all the draws we're seeing? Thinking of maybe some of the traditional powers not going as all out right out of the gate like they may have under a previous version of the World Cup.
100%. And apparently this is something that I called on the Pushing the Odds podcast over the recent weeks, was draws in the early games are things to watch for. You don't need to win that first game. People taking the foot off the gas and knowing that they got to play that one extra game as well, maybe. But it's also given the opportunity for these smaller teams. We've got 6 nations at this World Cup that would have not been here otherwise if it was on the previous format and the amount of teams. And I think that's the whole point of it's broadened the base. It's given countries that never would have gotten the chance before. Even Curacao getting their ass kicked 7-1. I mean, there's still a guy in that team now that has kicked a goal at the World Cup. So I think it's building up to everything that the expectations were with the addition of these extra countries. And while the format and the groups maybe has been diluted a little bit, and especially in that game, I mean, they've still got to play the games. They've still got to get the points. They've still got to advance. And they're still betting on it, which is the main thing. So, they play the games. We take the bets. So far, it's been some interesting results and not the draw growth that we would have expected from these results. I mean, yesterday, any previous World Cup, you get 4 draws in the day. It's making it rain at the end of the day and whatnot. That wasn't the case yesterday. The 4 draws didn't bring the prosperity that one would hope for. But again, it was still a good day.
And Joe, let's bring you into the fold when it comes to all things World Cup as well. Shortly before we hopped on to record this episode, in our WhatsApp chat, you shared a link to a Gambling Insider article with the headline that the U.S. is representing 5% of global wagering so far on the World Cup. So from that to anything else, where's your attention gravitating so far in this tournament?
I mean, I did think that article was interesting. Macquarie, they're the ones who came out and they had said that the U.S. was only representing 5% of total handle, legal handle. Let's qualify that. Legal regulated handle for this tournament, and that the U.S. could see 40% growth tournament over tournament in wagering, and it wouldn't even register a blip on that number for the total global regulated market. I mean, it's rich. I mean, probably the global unregulated market for soccer is significantly larger than the regulated market right now when you take into account like China and Pacific Rim countries. I think what's interesting about that is again, it's an indicator where the U.S. probably missed an opportunity in being able to, at least the sports books, miss an opportunity in not making it easier for international visitors to be able to register and play on the Fan Kings of the world and the Fanatics of the world. But, beyond that, I find it's interesting also when you see how, just a kind of combination of things. Like there's a lot of talk about the Americanization of this tournament. The big one that people seem to be really wringing their hands over are the water breaks, the pundit class losing their fucking collective minds, saying like, oh, now we're playing quarters instead of playing by halves. This is the American game. I think that's really easy for a bunch of guys to say when they're sitting up in air-conditioned studios talking about yesteryear. But the conditions are going to get worse for the athletes, not better. Fatigue is definitely going to be a factor. We talked about this a little bit last week. And to Adam's point, like, look, if you don't have to knock it out of the park and win and get 3 points at 1 point on a draw is satisfactory to advance in your group, do it. There's no need. Like, they don't give a trophy for winning in the first round of the group stage, so why bother? Now, what they should give trophies for are for amazing performances by people from small countries. And God, I've tried to memorize this guy's name like 8 different times, but the goaltender from Cabo Verde yesterday against Spain, that guy was like the Great Wall of China standing in front of the Spanish team. Unbelievable. That guy will go down as a legend in this game. To the more sense of humor, like I love that Curaçao's lone goal scorer on Twitter said like, and I scored a goal against Manuel Neuer, of Germany. I can't even do that on FIFA PlayStation. So, I mean, you've never seen a nation so happy about a 7-1 loss as you saw Curaçao in that particular game. So I do like that part of it, not to get too soapy, but I like that Lawrence, Kansas has gone out and they've learned the Tunisian national anthem since they're hosting the team. There's little bits and pieces. I like that Ecuador found out the hard way that you don't put your team jersey on the Rocky statue in Philadelphia and expect to win. There's a lot of really interesting and rich things, but, along with Adam, I think yesterday's Draw Fest, it doesn't seem like it really moved the needle at Prime or Betcris Arizona. I'd be really interested to hear how the results were, though, at the Square shops like the Fan Kings guys, because, it's just not, since it's primarily almost exclusively Americans betting in those shops right now, Americans don't bet on the draw. They bet on something to happen, right? It was one reason why I was bringing up Asian handicaps last week on our show. So I'd be really interested to see how the day landed for those shops versus the way it landed for us.
And we should get more insight on that in due time. But for now, we'll call a quick timeout on the World Cup and shift our sights to the world of golf with the U.S. Open teeing off in 2 days. Adam, how's the handle looking so far? And what are you watching for most closely?
Yeah, I mean, handle's been great straight out the gate. I mean, we go back 8 years, I think they last played at Shinnecock, and it was a bit of a shit show with the way the course was handled and the results. But all the cream rose to the top back then. I expect to see a bit much the same this week with all the top players in form. I've had a couple of interesting results. Obviously, a big outsider in the last major after Rory winning his Masters. So for me, this is probably one of the most wide open tournaments, especially the US Open. It's a bit like the British Open. You have players that just, horses for courses, can hit it a lot shorter, stay on the fairways, chipping around greens becomes more important and things like that. So US Opens, British Opens are always sort of some of the most fun to watch with players really struggling, and you get a bit of weather and wind pickup and the course gets hard and dry, then, they're the best golf tournaments. The pitch and putt things that are generally PGA Tours, shooting 20 under and things like that, I don't find those as interesting as what these can be when the weather really takes hold as well. So looking forward to it. As I said, I think all these players are in pretty good form coming into it. Brooks, who I believe won this in 2018, has a bit of an injury and pulled out yesterday. But again, it's just so much on at the moment. Golf, soccer, just wrapped up those two things. UFC Sunday night. It's a great time to be a bookmaker and a gambler.
And Joe, this might be quite the heat check after your Knicks and Hurricanes predictions, but I've got to ask, where's your interest in the U.S. Open?
When in doubt, say Rory, right? So
playing it safe. All right, so with that, let's bring things full circle with the World Cup. After that little hydration break powered by Planetech to talk some golf with Adam, let's call this a free kick, if you will.
Oh, God, that's awful. Jesus.
But let's wrap this up with a free kick, if you will. Matches you're most anticipating for betting reasons or otherwise over the coming week.
I think Croatia, England should be a great first up game. They've obviously got some history where they've played some good matches against each other. Senegal, France. I mean, there's some dynamics in this of teams playing against their ruling nations or kingdoms or whatever it was before independences and stuff like that. Iran playing in the US right now. Obviously, an interesting time right there. But I'm going to skew this a little bit because we didn't get into this enough. And I'm interested in the Americans' opinions on this. USC on the White House lawn. I mean, the schedule was a little loaded. It seemed like there was an up-and-comer versus an old guy every single fight. The old guy won the main event, which was, some hell of a fights there. You had Trump and Dana White coming out from the Oval Office and whatnot. I mean, as a sporting spectacle, I actually thought it'd come off a hell of a lot better, except for maybe the matchups and the fights. But, I mean, Americans, what was your opinion on this?
Joe, I'm going to punt this over to you quickly because all I've got is a quote. James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, most things are not worth having an opinion about. Maybe I was just basking in the afterglow of the Knicks win with my wife who's from New York, so didn't really register on my radar much, I'm afraid to admit. Joe, I bet you'll have something better than that to bring to the table here.
I'm obviously more of a boxing fan over MMA. I mean, the fight card, Adam, you're correct, and it was not the most competitive card. Some might say it was kind of like Christians versus the Lions. Lack of competitiveness on that card. As far as spectacle, it seemed like the biggest spectacle was security escorting Sean Strickland off the premises after he tried to sneak in through the fan zone or whatever it may be. I think it's tough because so many people want to turn it into the political football, and they want to turn it into a litmus test. It's like, oh, if you liked it, then you're, red state, red meat. If you didn't like it, you're a liberal snowflake. I just think from a fight quality, from what the little bit that I watched of it, there was not a lot of competitive balance to it. And so if that was intended to be a showcase for UFC and expand its popularity, I don't think they did a particularly good job of it.
Adam, I appreciate the doubling down on that event, even if I had nothing to bring to the table when it came to an American perspective. But if I can try to get this back on the rails to take us home with the World Cup, how would you describe your most noteworthy exposure on both sides of the counter looking ahead?
Again, there's a lot of favorite action. Need Senegal today against France. Actually, a draw is okay in that result at the moment. But yeah, I mean, ultimately for me, Friday's matchup, Australia-USA. Unfortunately, it was the one game I wanted to go to. I have a high school graduation on the Saturday. Even a private jet wouldn't have got me home in time. And as much as I would see that game, missing the high school graduation would be a lifetime sentence. So I think there's some great games coming up in the next round. Even like a Morocco, Scotland, Bosnia, Switzerland, Korea, Mexico will be a cracker as well. So I think the second round is going to bring some really good matchups of this thing. And for me, it's just the more volume we take, the better it is. And we're here to take action.
I think the interesting thing is that, we are not even completed the first round of games of the group stage. and you already have people who are doing their jockeying, discussions about with Spain's draw yesterday, talking about if they finish second in their group, then they would likely be ticketed to meeting Argentina in the next round in the knockout stage early on. Having two titans like that happen to go toe-to-toe that early in the tournament is probably great spectacle, but not particularly good for the tournament. But yeah, it is interesting to see how people are already starting to, on very meager, small data sample results, starting to look past the group stage into the knockout stage and see where people project. Very much like the NCAA basketball tournament, right? Which to me, this is the closest analog to. When people talk about the World Cup, I think about the NCAA basketball tournament. And I probably follow it like that. That's why, the smart money might be being on the chalk, but I'll sit there and I will go out of my mind for Curacao and Cabo Verde and teams like that every time.
And with that, we'll go ahead and tie a bow around this week's episode. To the audience, thanks as always for tuning in. The sports calendar continues to fire on all cylinders, so enjoy the US Open and the World Cup, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Prime Suspects. Register for Prime Sports at primesports.com and download the Prime Sports app. You can follow us on Twitter at @PrimeSuspects_, at Joe Brennan Jr., and at Adam Bjorn. You must be 21 or over to play on Prime Sports. Always bet responsibly and within your limits. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER.